All right, so the recording is started. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I would like to introduce Raphael Kosek. Her poems have appeared in numerous journals and magazines such as Southern Humanities Review, Briarcliff Review, Poetry East, Catamaran, the Chattahoochee Review, and many others. She also writes creative nonfiction and lyric essays, two of which have won first place awards at Eastern Iowa Review and Bacopa Review. Harmless Encounters won the 2021 Jesse Bryce Niles Chapbook Contest and was released in 2022. And Rough Grace won the 2014 Concrete Wolf Poetry Competition. American Mythology, a full-length book, was a finalist at the Brick Road Poetry Press and released in 2019. She served as the 2019-2020 Dutchess County, New York Poet Laureate. She lives in the beautiful Hudson Valley with her husband and 3 cats, where she teaches English at Dutchess Community College. Kosek graduated Vassar College with honors in English and a distinguished thesis, and also earned a master's in American literature from Western Connecticut State College. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Very nice.
I'll pass this off to John.
Nice to be here.
And Tess, thanks for kicking off. I think you're not the backup anymore. I think Wendy's like, okay, Tess is managing the technical part of poetry. So
Right.
I've been practicing. I read aloud.
I know, you're very good.
Listen, I join on, John.
No, listen, I appreciate your help since I'm 500 miles away, whatever it is, up in Maine.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So
thanks. So let me just let me start. No, I think no, Tess, thank you, Wendy, and the library for hosting this. And then Raphael, let me just start, then you can dive in.
Okay.
So I usually start with, what does inquiry mean to you?
It's probably the basis of everything, because to me, what do poets and artists do? They start wondering about something, and wondering implies movement and questioning, which results in travel, a quest, a push into something. So I think every poem is pushing into something unknown, because as I mentioned the other day to you, if I ever think that I have a poem planned out, that, oh, this is going to be where I can go with this poem, it's always a bad poem, because the end of inquiry for a poet is usually learning something new about yourself or the subject of your poem. And also it has to be some sort of surprise. The old saw, no surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader. Obviously, some genres you need to have a plan. Mystery writers have a plan of whodunits, right? But I think in poetry, it's very open-ended. And I think that's probably frightening to some people, but it's challenging for sure, So just a few things that I've gleaned from other poets. When I went to the Dodge Festival in the late 1990s, I met Billy Collins, and he said, he talked about a poem as a form of transportation. And that implies movement. So you're starting somewhere and you're going somewhere. And he said, you owe it to the reader to ground them in the beginning of the poem, some sort of context, because you are going to take them somewhere else and drop them off. So there it is. That's, and for the writer, that implies that you've been dropped off somewhere else other than where you maybe thought you were going. So that is the end of questioning. And it's often ambiguous. And I'd like that edict that you owe it to the reader to ground them in the beginning, because you are going to take them somewhere else at the end of that push or that question or that little bit of travel, right? There's usually a turn in a poem somewhere. You start somewhere and all of a sudden you're going somewhere else. So it's kind of also looking at where does a poem come from, but it's that wondering about something. And I will give you, I have 2 general categories that I'm going to look at, but I'll start with Well, actually, this is William Blake. I'm sure people are familiar with his poem, The Tiger. I have always loved that, and it's full of questions. I'll just read a little of it. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And he finally asks, I'm going to skip, what the hammer, what the chain, and what furnace was thy brain? Did he who made the lamb make thee? So it's a poem full of questions. I do it with students, but there's a questioning. It's what kind of a God made this world, right? And how could a God who made the lamb make the tiger? And that's what he pursues here. And he leaves us wondering about it, because that's got to be a rather kind of a scary God that made both those things, right? So I think, poets have pursued the basic questions, is there a God? What kind of a God made us? Why are we here? There's some very basic questions. And
So do you start with a question? Is there,
I
or
don't think I
does the-
start with a question. I'll give you, yeah, I guess. So here's a poem. This is in American mythology, which I'll
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about later, but this poem comes from something that I overheard in conversation. I was in a therapist waiting room, and a guy was having a conversation. I heard him say, last year I went swimming with horses. And I thought, what could that be like? And I actually interrupted him and asked to do that. And it was at a dude ranch. Okay. So, okay. And then I let it go. But here's my poem, Swimming with Horses, because yes, as a young girl, I was quite a horse fan, but I thought, what could that be like? What does that mean? Swimming with horses is like nothing else. The heavy body, svelte and muscled, entering the lightness of water, blue tipping plate of the lake, melding with an earthly beast, a steady heart, the healthy fear like a jet tearing the night sky of your bones. Swim, the trail guide yells. You slip off the horse, find the water yourself. The underthrash of hooves, equine eye that corrals you like God, hands, legs slicing the wind chop of water. You've never been so water blind in sun, scraping up onto the glazed stones of the far shore, cord in your hands, finding your feet and breathing hard, hauled up, emerging as if for the first time, the trees waving, the sky bright shining. So that I was trying to answer my question about what would that feel like, and it turned into almost sort of a baptismal experience, right? So that's one example. And I actually have a humorous example. Before I started teaching college, I taught high school off and on, and I substitute taught in high school for a long time. So I was in one day for a special ed teacher, and I was sitting in the back of the room of an earth science classroom. And this is called 5 Questions from an Earth Science Review. Found questions answered by the poet. These 5 questions just tickled me, and I thought, how could I answer these questions, right? Because obviously they had specific earth science answers. 1, what is a landscape? What you see through the car window on a windy day, with the sun riding high and your mind spinning happily with the miles? Or maybe it's Bruegel's industrious peasants, those stand-ins for us, working, dancing, hunting in a world of wheat, snow, mad revelry, or hardy grief, bucking up and keeping on no matter the season. 2, What type of relief do mountains have? So satisfying to hear that even the mountains, those big boys, need relief. So tiresome to keep struggling skyward. Civilizations rising and falling, planes flying into them, goats chipping away at their rocky skins, hermits loud in their silent huts, restless wanderers trying to get high. 3. What causes most mountain ranges to have many folds and faults? If we have to ask, we haven't looked at our own chins lately, particularly when we peer downward and gravity does its work. And do we still believe in the perfect anything? We've long embraced the homely, reckless, and inadequate. Make do. That's what we do here, and we do it so well. 4. What are competent rock? This get you checking the number, gender. We're all here, all accounted for, except for the ones who aren't. Surely they must be the incompetent rock. 5. What are some human activities that affect a landscape? It began with Adam and Eve, the apple gone missing, the branch bobbing suspiciously if anyone was looking, and hasn't stopped since. And my grandmother did her part, coming to this country, tossing and seasick on a ship from Holland. They told her to wear her best clothes, get rid of the others so she wouldn't look like a greenhorn. Dutiful, she put on her best outfit, stood on the deck, and threw the rest into the great chop of the North Atlantic. The wake, churning with the slick backs of dolphins, sea creatures nosing her worn petticoats, old blue jacket, mended skirts, leaping among the life she was leaving behind, the earth forever altered, a new world looming and shifting on the tides, unmeasurable by even the most calculated of questions. So that was having fun with those earth science questions. And I was bored sitting in the back of the room, so that's what I was doing.
So there was another teacher in front. You were just like,
yes, yeah, the
assistant, yeah.
actual science teacher. When with special ed, usually you just sit in the room.
You
and
have two teachers, yeah.
Students, right? There's two teachers, so I got to sit there and kind of enjoy this. And I thought, what fun to answer these questions, you know?
Hey, did you just sign up for more like substitute teaching after that?
I did that for a long time, probably too long before I started teaching college. Okay, and probably one more example that kind of turns that bit of questions upside down. This is from a chapbook called Rough Grace, and it's all about the relationship of art and life, which I'm fascinated by. But I also heard at one of the Dodge Poetry Festivals a favorite poet of mine who is since deceased, Adam Zagajewski, Polish poet. And he has a poem that I base this on where he interviews Schumann, the composer, but you never see the questions, only the answers. So I did that with a favorite painter of mine. When I was a little girl, I was fixated on Henri Rousseau's jungle paintings, all those vines and leaves and animals and teeth and tigers. So I did a poem called Henri Rousseau Answers Questions. Because the white lake of canvas waits for me, the lovely free space invites me to wander, to arrive at some unforeseen destination. No, I was never afraid of the distance where France vanishes. Did I say how grateful I am? Believe me, I know all about Hamlet's nutshell. Here, I am king of 1,000 leaves, animal eyes, the bewildering body. And my garden blooms without withering, and my garden overruns its borders, and my garden swells to the sea, where I skim the tender curve of the blue world in the bright boat I have fashioned. Look at what falls into shadow, into 100 shades of green, the splay of leaf and blossom, where person and panther connive, where the tiger holds a deer-like creature in its teeth, stilled in a frozen paradise. You say I've made the savage and the exotic curiously tame? Yes, the ripping of flesh is silent here, and the lion could almost lie down with the lamb. So if I started that poem with a question, my question would be, what was it like for Rousseau? How did he feel when he was painting those paintings, right? So there's the question that kind of pushes the poem.
Well, I think it's a neat methodology to just give us the answers
Right.
and not the questions, because I feel like there's a third person talking
Yeah.
on a kind of a monologue or dialogue about stuff,
Right. And I credit Adam Zagajewski for giving me that format. I love the format. I think some other people have used it as well. So that was one poem. And I have one more poem that, before I get into O'Keeffe and American mythology, it's a newer poem. It's from last spring. It's not yet been published. I'm hoping someone will take it. And it came from a journal entry. My husband and I have bluebird houses in the back, and the last couple summers, we've had house wrens inhabiting the bluebird houses, which is disappointing because I like to see the bluebirds, right? So, well, we thought, okay, we made a decision to remove the wren's eggs in the nest. So this is where this poem comes from, but it also came about the week of the Uvalde shooting in Texas. So I didn't think I was going to make this connection in the poem, but there must have been a real feeling behind this. Okay, it's called Bluebirds. The air is wet with moist heat on this clouded late May day. I'm not sure if it's welcoming or not. If I had to say, I think it tastes like grief, even though the birds are going about their business as usual, and my heart still beats. The bluebird house in the backyard remains empty after my beloved and I tacitly agreed to purge the wren's 6 tiny brown eggs in her lovingly piled pyramid of twigs, hoping for the brighter beauties. I watched his hand clasp the nest and toss it into the woods. Earlier this week, a child smeared herself with another's blood to avoid the gunman's ire. I think it is going to rain if it makes its mind up, and there will be no bluebirds in this house of death. So if I'm exploring a question there, it's associating what we did with Uvalde, because we felt, I don't think we'd ever do that again. I don't think we'd ever throw anyone's eggs out of a nest because we felt horrible after it. And you see the equation there. I mean, obviously it's relative, but we felt very guilty and very bad and remorseful. And it
So
was
what happened to the wrens after that? Did they come back or?
No, they did not. And the box remained empty all summer, which was terrible. So we're not doing that again. But the question maybe that I pursued in there was spearheaded by my grief. And I mean, killing is killing, no matter what, what degree. And we felt horrible after it. Okay, I'm going to talk about 2 larger quests or questionings. I mentioned to you, John, that in the early 2000s, I'd gone through maybe a rough patch, and I came home from being high school librarian with a biography of Georgia O'Keeffe, which fascinated me. I was fascinated by her and her life, and I started And I really admired that she knew who she was early on and knew she had to do all this painting, and she stuck to that. And I think my pursuing writing, I wrote maybe 100 poems about her paintings, was an effort to somehow unearth her strengths and her motivations, and also what she maybe had to say about our lives via those paintings. So it was a very interesting time for me, because I don't think I really ever obsessed over something the way I obsessed over her paintings. I was writing maybe 2 poems a week, and I kept discovering new paintings. She was very prolific, and I just kept moving through them. And most of them have been published, and they're sprinkled in my chapbooks and my book. But it was natural for me to pursue this. And I think the other person, I've never written about him, who also pursued his life because he knew who he was probably Bob Dylan. There's another example. There are some people out there. And I think I need to admit that I returned to poetry in my 40s, because after my thesis at Vassar, which was poetry, I got married, taught high school, went to grad school, had 2 children. And every day of that life, I would feel this niggling bitterness because I wasn't writing. So I returned to it in my 40s. I think that's what drew me to O'Keeffe, because I admired her stick-to-itiveness. So just to share a little bit, this poem, it's in American mythology. It was about in her youth, she did go to Texas to teach art in school there as a young girl. And I was trying to kind of delve into, from this painting, what caught her about the Western landscape, because she's from New York State, actually, and she lived near Lake George with Stieglitz, her husband. So this painting is called From the Plains 1, 1919. It's an early painting. When you settled in West Texas, you saw the light over the plains like a great overturned bowl, the sky ragged with wind that blew for days. The blue-green sea of light bellowed and broke as the dark came down, as the earth thrust itself back into sky, and clouds jutted over the huge bowl like cattle before a storm, trampling the waving grasses, knitting down the patterned earth, while the mind raced and the heart beat and the wind came like your own wild breath. And I was trying to find out how maybe she felt down there when she first started seeing this first bit of Western landscape, which of course drew her to New Mexico later. And again, it's a question. The first poem in American mythology is her red canna, which is a huge red, red flowers, and they're really kind of overwhelming. And I thought it plunges you. I think art can be that way, art and literature, and I mean all the arts. So I kind of look at that in this red canna, 1924, Georgia O'Keeffe. You are not a flower, but a firestorm. Nothing hotter than your reds and yellows, the purple bleed of your exploding heart. Grief offered up gold as joy. You are the hoped-for Mardi Gras, the Friday night of the soul. Anyone who burrows into your lips, the crackle of your flame, anyone who wakes and wakes in the stirring sheaves of your heart, does not go home again. And I think that may speak for all artists in poetry. Once you delve into something, you are in pursuit of something. I don't think you catch it. I don't think you define it, but you can never be the same again. You can't go home again. So interesting. And I think a lot of her paintings have something to say about our human condition. I'll read 2 more and then I'll move on to American mythology. These are in American mythology.
Well, two more, and then we have a little audience Q and
Question.
A.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. But one of her paintings is particularly garish. It's called At the Rodeo, New Mexico, and it's just a circle. It's almost symmetrical, and it's not pretty. It's ugly and garish. And I finally wrote about it because I didn't like it. So am I pursuing a question here? I am. I'm pursuing. Why do I dislike this painting? Because what am I seeing in this painting, right? At the Rodeo, New Mexico. O'Keeffe, you understand, we don't all ride bulls for a living, but the yolk yellow eye in the center of your garish corral says we may as well crack ribs in the dusty ring of this life. Ride high flyers until the bloodshot eye of some aggravated beast has it in for us, until we are welted in blue-black, just another color of blood, until the flesh of our dream, the huge risk we take, is carnival pulp under the sharp hooves of whatever rides us, and the brutal, well-meant cries of strangers rain down like hard chips of turquoise sky. So again, in her paintings, what am I seeing? An analogy for life, our lives, right? We are in our own rodeo of sorts, right?
Did you ever ask yourself, why did she paint that? You know, I guess is that one that kind of just didn't fit in with her general concept, or
right. Well, I'm sure she had her reason, but I wanted to explore that, and it's a hard message in that painting, I think.
Yeah. It's
she's looking at the garishness and the brutishness and the ugliness of, life as rodeo.
yeah.
Yeah. And I'll leave O'Keeffe, but I think I've been fascinated. My book, I'll just mention this, American mythology, I taught American literature for years. I love American history. I'm always fascinated with who are we as Americans? We are loners, we are risk takers, we are always looking for a new frontier, whether it's physical, artistic, psychological, right? What did D.H. Lawrence say about us? I have an epigraph from him in this book. He visited here in the 1930s. I think he met O'Keeffe, but we are a hard people, because this is what he said after reading Last of the Mohicans and observing Americans. Quote, "The essential American soul is hard, isolate, stoic, and a killer. It has never yet melted. The most unfree souls go west and shout of freedom." And that's from his studies in classic American literature. And I kind of take that American mythology on in this book, both in personal poems about personal life and, historical figures. So I'm talking about a questioning here, because this book stewed in my head for several months before it was formatted. And I really wondered, who are we? What is our American mythology? And it's the answers are both, there's positive answers and there's scary answers. We are killers. Look at all the guns we have. We're still killers, right? But that was pursuing an exploration of questioning of, how do I see America? So that's where the poems in here go. And I took on a lot of figures. I took on Dorothy Bradford, who did commit suicide, Mary Todd Lincoln, Meriwether Lewis, myself, everyday life for Americans. So I'll read a few of those, but I don't know why don't I start with one and then maybe open it to questions?
Yeah.
I have always questioned, I think relationships are one of the hardest things there are. And a marital relationship, a significant other, we know each other really well, and we learn how different we really are. And I was substituting the library and I was flipping through a book of pictures of first ladies. And I saw a picture of Mary Todd Lincoln. And I thought to myself, my God, she looks physically so different from Lincoln. He was tall and skinny. She was plump and short. So that's where the poem comes from. And I was also questioning their marriage, right? And maybe all marriages, my marriage, Mary Todd Lincoln. I don't know how he lived with her, she with him. The sweet round face, bred to be happy, a full, pleasant life. Not the deep worry of a tall, thin man who was friend to insomnia, who weighed the light and the dark, who bedeviled himself with the broken country. How could they not drink the water of the Potomac, lose a son to the malaria-tainted airs of the city surrounded by swamp? The unspeakable sacrifice Abraham nearly made, more real to them than any happiness they ever knew, old hands at losing sons. How to leave such losses, cut short mourning, carry the weight. Serious responsibility must consecrate such a one as he, but she, with her soft, full body, her smiling into occasional madness, some said childishness, the spendthrift ways as his 300 pairs of lace gloves could buy back what grief swallowed, a vase here, a rich cushion there to soften the bare walls, the rough-hewn face that bore the brunt. She couldn't bear to attend the funeral. How could she not be forgiven? Even falling into debt can have its blessings, and madness, after all, is a haven of sorts, not far from heaven. So that was my questioning her, because there were a lot of issues with Mary Todd Lincoln. Some said she had lead poisoning, some said she suffered from anemia. But certainly it's an exploratory poem, a questioning of her and who she was and how they managed together being so different.
Yeah,
Right?
no, that's great. So
Yeah.
let's have a little time. That was fantastic so far. So I think Kathy and Irene know the drill. I think Michael knows it from the last year is we like some time for comments or questions. If you have any, it's just a time to have a conversation with the poet. So Kathy, you want to kick it off?
Sure, I have a couple, but let me start with one that's related to American mythology. I was interested when you talked about this stewing in your head for several months. And I wondered where that was in the process. Was this like after writing poetry, or was this like a preconceived notion that you might pursue this? Or
Most of these poems already existed. Because as I mentioned, I've always loved American history, history and American literature, and goes hand in hand. And I remember it was wintertime, January, and I was using my exercise bike in the cellar because it was really cold out. And I was listening to some music and I was thinking about this, and the title occurred to me, and I kept looking, I kept feeling, I have a poem in here about what would a current prophet be like. I felt like I could see the whole United States, even though I've never been out west, and I have a poem about that, but I could feel the plains, I could feel the trains going over them, I could feel the buffalo that had been there. And it was a strange thing, but I could visualize the book. And I was so happy because I had sent out, this was my first full-length book, and I had sent out, maybe 6 or 7 full-length books with different titles before. And, you always hear people talk about how the hell do you organize the full-length book, right? I heard some people, they throw it on the floor, but no, I don't believe in that. So suddenly this gelled for me, and I saw, I've got a theme. Who are we? As people, who are we? What kind of people came here? What kind of people were the people who had to be, what did they have to be like in order to cross this freaking ocean and come to an uninhabited place? Well, of course it was inhabited. That was another terrible issue, right?
Right, right.
But no, I had most of the poems. So I'd been, I liked these, I was fascinated by these people. I was actually teaching American Lit 1 when I read Nathaniel Philbrook's Mayflower and learned that um, Bradford's wife, the pilgrims, fell off of the ship in Provincetown Harbor while he was reconnoitering, looking for a place for them to stay. And most people conjectured that it was a suicide because they had left their 4-year-old son behind. So that was fascinating to me. So I did a poem on her. How did she feel coming here before she went over the side of the Mayflower? So I have a poem on her. I have a poem on Meriwether Lewis, who killed himself, supposedly, after all that he did, because this fascinated me. What happened to these people? I have poems about myself here when I was young, thinking to a poem called Flood, when you have little children and your wife and a mother and you have a dog and a routine of just what would it feel like to walk out of your life? Because that's what a lot of American heroes did. They left, they went, they went farther west. It's just a strange thing. Yeah. So I did have a lot of the poems and I realized that, yeah, there was a theme here and I was really excited. It got me going. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And obviously people agreed with you when it
finally, yes, finally. Right. Yeah. I can share with you, I'll share with you I haven't read too many personal poems with me in them.
Well, Raphael, don't do that yet. We still may
Okay.
have some questions.
All right.
Michael, do you have something there? I see you unplugged.
Yeah, Raphael, first, thank you so much. They're wonderful poems, and Kathy, I'm glad you got it. I didn't really, how you got a manuscript together, but I was fascinated and really appreciated how you use history and, how you use painters and also in particularly with the rodeo poem. How different that was from the previous two poems about, the red cabin, and how I had my notes. I said, after the first two, I had beautiful. And then of course, at the rodeo, it's like, wow, this is hard edged. And what a great contrast to be able to do that. So,
Right.
And I appreciate it because it sounds like you're going to read some poems that are more about you, but
Yeah.
My question was going to be, well, how do you kind of shift? Because sometimes we get kind of hung up on ourselves and writing poems about ourselves, but how do you kind of break out of that?
I have something to say about that. Sometimes I can't bear to gaze at my own navel. I want to get out of it. And I find that, and here's the funny thing. So I get out of it by looking at, paintings, writing about these historical figures. But guess what? When you're writing about somebody else, who are you also learning about? You're learning about yourself in those poems. That's the neat part of it. And I often found that I went farther and learned something more about myself, writing about something outside of myself. I don't always like focusing, on my navel, on myself. How do I feel? Obviously adolescents write about themselves, love, death, whatever. And I did too, and I still do. In fact, my latest chapbook has very many personal poems in it because it's a lot about dealing with my mother's demise and her death and, cancer and with my husband and things like that. But I love writing outside of myself. And, people say, write what you know. But yeah, I could say write what you find too, write what, grabs your attention as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so now, go ahead, Raphael, if you want to read some more poems.
Okay. All right, I marked this. I have to just change sheets here. Okay, American Mythology, Flood, page 31. All right, here's the poem that I was mentioning. And it's an older poem from when I still had children in the house. It's called Flood. How hopeless it all seems late at night. Keep it up for the children, the husband, the dog. Don't let them see the trouble inside you. How the white pill of the moon is your drug of choice. How your sweaty breasts lie heavy, awkward, after all these years against the flesh above the ribs. How your life abrades you. Read a book, write a poem, go to church. Keep your finger in the hole, for you know the flood will come, uprooting trees, pulling up the years like carrots. You're tired of constructing the ark of safety nets, insurance. You have never left your life. Now something in you welcomes the restless slap of water where it laps the dark shore, the whining wind, careless stranger who loiters, horse saddled up. So that again, that takes the impulse that, I think every one of us at one point, not even for bad reasons, thinks we just like to just step out of our lives for a while, right? Do something, be somebody else, whatever. And that kind of goes along with American mythology, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot more of that going on nowadays. People seem to be, I don't know, some people are more tethered to other
Yeah.
people, and other people are less tethered, where they just and
Oh,
fly
yeah.
away.
No, I'm pretty tethered, but it was fun to write about being non-tethered. And that's another outlet that art gives us. It's an outlet. You can pursue in art something that you wouldn't want to pursue in real life. You might
Yeah.
taste it in the art. And here's another one that's personal, and it was nominated for a Pushcart Prize. Of course, it didn't get one. April's Kitchen. And I spend a lot of time in my kitchen. So April's Kitchen, and April is that important month, right? Why do I think of Sylvia Plath while washing parsley at the sink, looking out the window at how fast spring has come upon us, the sun so strong and warm. My son is outside chopping wood that will weather for next winter. The dull thunk of the axe, comforting, the dogwood on the verge of blossoming. He will go out after supper, he tells me, to see his girlfriend. I worry they are perhaps too serious, too young. I wonder what movie they will see, what life they will make. Then I think of Sylvia taping the doors and windows before she turned on the oven. Was she wearing an apron? Had she set her hair the night before? Didn't she kiss the children one by one? Isn't everything we do serious? The French take their food as a serious pleasure. I am slow chopping the fragrant parsley, aware the faucet is dripping and will not stop. I hear the thud of the axe, watch as the wood splits cleanly, falling to the ground as if it knew its duty. Drop by drop, the water slips away and down. Stroke by stroke, destruction has a rhythm. There is no stopping the burgeoning blooms, the plans dark and deep, the murderous beauty of bright things.
Fantastic.
Amazing.
So that's, it takes on children, death, the murderous beauty of bright things. I always thought there was something tragic about, beauty and its demise, I suppose.
I feel like it's the game of Clue. Colonel Mustard did it in the kitchen with a.
Yeah.
I wonder if the kitchen seems to be a central point of drama.
It is.
In the household.
Absolutely. Right. And I have another, probably a good one for, okay, it's called a friend of mine. This is called For Catherine, 21 Days for Catherine, mother of a soldier. She told me in conversation that her son was coming home from Afghanistan in 21 days. And she said, I don't remember if she said it or I said it, that's probably going to be harder on you than it is on him. And again, I don't remember if she said that but she agreed and I agreed that it would be harder on her than on him. So this is a poem that I like to say, as far as an origin, it fell into my lap because as a mother, you know, with 2 children, one a son, I could really identify with her. And it was just interesting, the imagery that I wound up using in the poem that I didn't know I was going to use in the beginning. Okay, it's called 21 Days. 21 days until he comes home, and each one fires like the desert sun. Her heart has long worn camouflage, laced up the boots of its beating, her breath tightly controlled. She knows he will come home different. 21 pearls on a string, she prays the cord will hold. She curses the ties that bind. 21 eggs in a basket, 21 loaves and fishes. But if the multiplication fails, her heart wears a helmet. Her voice fills with sand. 21 miracles nearly too much to ask. 21 blackbirds breaking out of a pie. 21 reasons not to die. No one can know what walls have come down, what limbs she has severed, how she blows herself up every day.
Wow. Woo.
I wind up using allusions
Great.
to nursery rhymes, Bibles in the Miracle,
Oh, that's
and
great.
the military, right? To convey how this mother would feel, because that's how I would feel, right? Going through that.
And how did it work out, if you can share that with us? I mean, did it work out? Was it a big
yes.
shock for her?
No, it was good. He was fine. And I think he actually went back and forth, but this was one of his leaves, you know, after 21 days. Yeah. Yep. And he is alive and well today. So that was good. Yeah. And okay, another question. I like the idea of poetry associated with prophets, because of course the early prophets wrote in poetic form. And I always had a feeling that poets were the seers. We're the ones that are supposed to see things and maybe, you know, predict something. So I sort of asked myself, what would a modern day prophet, you know, have to say or see? So this is called Prophet, and it's in American mythology. Prophet. I'm falling through, saving up, drowning down. I can't holler hopeful anymore. I drink dreams, magnify minutiae. I'm sinning in songs for all those who cannot ignore eternity, for all who are digging discernible graves. I'm shoring up against your gravitas. Comedians are the saddest people I know. Dorothea Lange said, quote, art is an act of total attention, unquote. Snap, click, you got it. You're looking at it. I will love you if you let me. Leave the mirror, turn the page. Words are crackers that crumble. We're expecting a monstrous storm. The trees stand up and whistle, and the sky she rains. Ease into your skin. Pile the sandbags. The war is not over. We are the war. And that's a personal favorite of mine.
Yeah, we are the war. Interesting concepts.
Yeah.
So we only have about 5 more minutes. So
Okay. Why don't I read the title poem, American Mythology? And if you're of a certain age, you came of age with cowboys in the films and movies, right? So that's kind of, and I as a little girl, oh my God, I loved all of them. I watched all of them. But you know, who is this person we're talking about? This Clint Eastwood loner, right? This John Wayne, and we're still manufacturing them. So it's called American Mythology. I've never been out west, but the frontier is in my bones. All those cowboys from childhood churning up the dust on countless horses, Sugarfoot, Rowdy Yates, Maverick, and the Bonanza Boys. Oh, how they knew how to be cruel and kind. The right dose of tough, the brilliant smile under a cocked hat as they righted the world. Death on camera was never real, though they spoke with guns, besting the Indians played by mournful Mexicans with painted faces. I learned to keep my wagons moving, while the great horse of the world dips and sways with currents unseen. Savor the hard edge, feel the blade, keep your legs tight and bend into the wind, which blows every way but where you figured. Sand in your teeth, you keep crossing rivers, losing your footing, your horse, your bearing. Crawling over the mountains, you are so high, you jettison what holds you back. That last barrel, book, word, belief, but not the whiskey, never the whiskey. You starve your mother, leave your child. This is how you tackle a frontier that pulls you farther and farther away until you are gone into a sky so big you cry for words. Fill your pockets with dirt and your mouth with stones. There you go, descending into all those gaping canyons, never to return. Heartless vagabond, broken, unspeakable, leaning into a copper wind. So there's our American hero, whoever he is, right?
No, I love it. Paladin, the rifleman. I don't think I always remembered people were trying to like start a fight with Cheyenne Bodie, who was like, what, 6'6". I'm like, as a kid, I was going, mistake.
Oh, my Lord. Right. I should end on something little.
Yeah. One
positive.
more.
One
And
more,
Raphael,
right.
it's been fantastic. The imagery, my head is playing this movie inside my head of all the different images you've thrown out today.
Yep. Okay, here's something hopeful. And it's about, again, where does the poem come from? I was waiting at the traffic light down the road from me here, and I saw a young man lighting a cigarette and getting ready and crossing the road. So this is called The Young Man Lighting Up. The young man paused just long enough to cup his hand lovingly around the cigarette, lighting it before stepping out into the clench of 4-lane traffic, weaving his way among us as I watched him, slim and confident, bent on reaching the store across the street, careless with the surety of youth, and I can only assume he reached his destination as I didn't hear the screech of brakes or bray of horns as the light turned. The following day, I recalled him with longing, something connate, and he grew in significance because it was so insignificant, precisely why I keep seeing him doing what we all do, cupping our hands around the thin flame of something we nurture for good or ill as we step into the world's thrash, confident, fully believing we will reach the other side. Okay.
Well, I think that's I think that's very uplifting. I mean, in Maine, no one walks across an intersection, so I don't have that problem. No kidding.
And
Yeah.
I think American mythology, I do have my website is raphaelkosek.com. It's available, I think, from Brick Road Poetry Press and Amazon. And I guess Rough Graces as well. That's Art and Life. And I didn't read anything from Harmless Encounters, which is my new one, but I have a lot of nature and bird poems, but I've always hated strictly nature poems, so they're always about people as well. I didn't read any of those today for some reason, but anyway, well, bluebirds, right? Okay.
Yeah, I think you took care of us with after the bluebirds. I think you ended the bird poem genre there.
I heard this quote long ago from somewhere, and I couldn't find it, and I couldn't remember who, but someone said all poetry is either ironic or ecstatic. And I think it's kind of true, because I think, you know, irony looks at the weird things and the weird questions that arise and where things go, right? And I do have a lot of ecstatic poems, you know, poems that are just ecstatic about life. So interesting quote. I'll leave with that. I don't know if anybody has any other thoughts, but this was great fun.
No, this has been a fantastic hour. And as I said, you cross so many dimensions. You know, I feel like we're, I love the keep your wagons moving. I feel like you should have been a
Yeah.
writer for one of the Westerns, you know, Rawhide, keep those
That's right.
wagons moving. No, no, no.
Oh
No,
God,
but
that was
part
my
of this-
favorite. Rowdy Yates and Rawhide.
Oh,
my
Rowdy
word.
Yates, God.
Yep.
Oh, God, I tell you, I think, I don't know, I think a good 6 or 7 years of my childhood was more watching
Uh-huh.
Westerns than learning
Yep.
anything at school.
Right. Yeah.
No, really, thank you so much. It has been,
But it is, and some people ask me, what do you mean by our American mythology? Well, yeah, we have one. It's the frontier, you know, and we're always we are risk takers, we are loners, and we also are the loneliest people in the world, I think, you know.
yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Well, thank you again. It's been a fantastic hour. And
Kathy, are you reading next Tuesday?
yeah, Kathy and her group, the Virginia Women's Poetry Collective.
Okay.
Yeah, we're having a quartet.
I'm reading a little, but I'm reading myself later in the season in May.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Raphael,
thanks,
thanks again.
Tess and
And-
John, thank you for organizing. Yeah, very nice.
We'll send you the record. No, absolutely beautiful. I tell you, I get so chest-nosed. I get so charged up after poetry hour. I feel like I should run outside and run down. I can't
Right.
because my back hurts, but if my back didn't hurt, I'd be
Right.
running down the street right now.
Oh, I had a bulging herniated disc in November.
Yeah.
Please.
Right. No, very good. We're going to end it all. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone.
Okay.
Nice
All right,
to see you.
Tess.